What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors sits across from a talk show host who thinks he can push any button and get away with it? What you're about to witness is the moment Tom Hardy's legendary composure finally cracked on live television. And it all started with what seemed like an innocent question about his personal life. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that had the entire studio audience sitting in stunned silence, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about late-night television. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel live studio felt different that Thursday evening. Tom Hardy had arrived to promote his latest film, but something in his demeanor suggested he wasn't in the mood for Kimmel's usual brand of humor. The British actor sat rigidly in the guest chair, his jaw set in that familiar way that anyone who had worked with him recognized as a warning sign. Kimmel, oblivious to the tension radiating from his guest, launched into his opening with his trademark grin. "So, Tom, I've got to ask you about something that's been making headlines. There are rumors swirling about your personal relationships, and I know our audience would love to hear the real story straight from you." Hardy's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained controlled. "Jimmy, I'm here to talk about the film. Let's focus on that, shall we?" "Oh, come on," Kimmel pressed, leaning forward with that predatory smile that had made countless celebrities uncomfortable over the years. "You can't expect to keep everything private when you're in the public eye. The tabloids are saying some pretty interesting things about your marriage. Care to set the record straight?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably as Hardy's silence stretched on. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge that made everyone present sit up a little straighter. "I said, I'm here to discuss my work. My personal life is exactly that. Personal." Kimmel chuckled, but there was something calculated about it. "You know, for someone who plays such tough guys on screen, you seem pretty sensitive about a simple question. I mean, it's not like I'm asking for state secrets here." "Sensitive?" Hardy repeated, his accent thickening the way it always did when his temper began to flare. "No, Jimmy, I'd call it having boundaries. Something you might want to look into?" The talk show host's smile faltered for just a moment, before returning full force. "Wow, okay, someone's having a bad day. Maybe we should talk about your method acting instead. I heard you stayed in character for months while filming your latest role. That must have been tough on everyone around you." Hardy's hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrests of his chair, slowly clenched into fists. "What exactly are you implying?" Nothing at all," Kimmel said with false innocence. "I'm just saying that some people in Hollywood have mentioned how, shall we say, intense you can be to work with. There are stories about you being difficult on set, demanding, maybe even a little unstable when you get too deep into a character." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Hardy leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more menacing than if he had shouted, "Unstable? Is that what you just called me on national television?" Energy. Kimmel's producer frantically gestured from behind the cameras, but the host was too caught up in what he perceived as good television to back down. "Hey, I'm just repeating what I've heard. You know how this town loves to talk. Maybe if you were a little more open about your process, people wouldn't have to speculate." "My process," Hardy said slowly, "is none of your business. And neither is my personal life, my marriage, or anything else that doesn't directly relate to the film I came here to promote. But since you seem so interested in difficult behavior, let me ask you something, Jimmy." The host's confident expression began to waver as Hardy continued. "How many guests have walked off your show? How many celebrities have specifically requested not to appear here because of exactly this kind of ambushed journalism disguised as entertainment?" "Ha ha, I don't know what you're talking about," Kimmel protested, but his laugh sounded forced now. "We're just having a conversation." "A conversation?" Hardy's voice rose slightly and several audience members actually flinched. "You call this a conversation? You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to bait me into giving you some kind of dramatic reaction for your cameras. You've questioned my professionalism, my mental stability, and my personal relationships, all while hiding behind that plastic smile of yours. The studio had fallen completely silent, except for the hum of cameras still rolling. Kimmel looked genuinely rattled for the first time in years. "Tom, I think you're overreacting a bit here." "Overreacting?" Hardy stood up from his chair, his full presence suddenly dominating the small stage. "You want to see overreacting? You want to see the unstable method actor everyone's supposedly talking about?" Kimmel instinctively leaned back in his chair. "Tom, let's just take a breath here." "No, Jimmy, let's not. Let's talk about what you really do here, night after night. You invite people onto your show under the pretense of promoting their work. Then you spend your time trying to humiliate them for the entertainment of your audience. You dig into their personal lives. You repeat gossip and rumors as if they're facts, and you act like it's all just harmless fun." The host tried to regain control of the situation. "Look, this is live television. Things can get a little heated sometimes, but there's no need to—" "What?" Hardy interrupted, his voice now carrying the full weight of his theatrical training. "There's no need to call out a bully when I see one? There's no need to defend myself when you're actively trying to damage my reputation on your platform?" By now, even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep filming or cut to commercial. Kimmel's usual arsenal of deflecting jokes had completely abandoned him as he faced down an actor who had clearly reached his breaking point. Hardy took a step closer to the host's desk, and the change in his posture was unmistakable. This wasn't Tom Hardy the celebrity anymore. This was someone who had spent years embodying dangerous characters, and for the first time in his career, Jimmy Kimmel was genuinely afraid of one of his guests. "You know what your problem is, Jimmy?" Hardy's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "You've been doing this for so long that you've forgotten these are real people sitting across from you, not just content for your show." Kimmel tried to force another laugh, but it came out as more of a nervous cough. "Tom, I think maybe we should take a commercial break." "No," Hardy said firmly, placing both hands on the desk and leaning forward until he was eye level with the host. "We're not taking a break. You wanted to have this conversation on live television, so let's have it. Let's talk about the real Jimmy Kimmel." The audience was so quiet you could hear individual people breathing. Several producers had appeared at the edge of the stage, but none dared interrupt what was unfolding. "Let's talk about how you built your entire career on making people uncomfortable," Hardy continued, his voice steady but filled with controlled fury. "You think because you're behind that desk, because this is your show, that gives you the right to say whatever you want to whoever sits in this chair?" Kimmel's face had gone pale, and beads of sweat were visible on his forehead under the studio lights. "Tom, this is just entertainment. People expect a certain level of—" "Entertainment?" Hardy's laugh was humorless and harsh. "Is that what you call it when you spend 20 minutes trying to get someone to break down on camera? When you dig into their personal trauma and family issues for laughs? That's your idea of entertainment?" The host looked desperately toward his producers, but they seemed as frozen as everyone else. "I never meant to offend you. If I crossed a line—" "If you crossed a line?" Hardy straightened up, his full height now towering over the seated host. "Jimmy, you didn't just cross a line, you obliterated it. You've spent this entire interview trying to provoke me, and now that you're getting a reaction, you want to back down?" Kimmel's voice cracked slightly as he tried to respond. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? Talk about your movie." "Now you want to talk about my movie?" Hardy's voice rose with incredulous anger. "After spending 15 minutes attacking my character, my professionalism, and my personal life, now you think we can just pivot to talking about my work like nothing happened?" The studio audience was beginning to murmur, some people pulling out their phones, despite the no-recording policy. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interview anymore. This was television history being made, and everyone could feel it. "You sit behind that desk night after night," Hardy continued, beginning to pace back and forth in front of Kimmel's desk like a caged animal. And you think that makes you untouchable. You think you can say whatever you want, because you're the host, because this is your territory. But let me tell you something about territory, Jimmy. Hardy stopped pacing and fixed Kimmel with a stare that had intimidated some of the toughest actors in Hollywood. I've played killers, soldiers, fighters, men who've had to survive in situations you couldn't imagine, and every single one of those characters taught me something about standing up to bullies. Kimmel was now visibly shaking, his usual confidence completely shattered. Tom, please, let's just what? Pretend this didn't happen? Laugh it off? Move on to the next segment where you can humiliate someone else? Hardy's voice was getting louder now, filling every corner of the silent studio. How many actors have sat in this chair and left feeling worse about themselves because of your questions? How many have gone home and had to explain to their families why a talk show host was spreading rumors about their personal lives on national television? The host tried one more time to regain control. This is my show, Tom. I think maybe it's time for you to... Your show? Hardy's laugh was genuinely frightening now. This is your show? So that means you can treat people however you want? Is that how this works? You invite someone here as a guest, then you attack them for your audience's amusement? Hardy suddenly slammed his hand down on Kimmel's desk, causing the host to jump back in his chair and several audience members to gasp audibly. Let me tell you what your show really is, Jimmy. It's a platform for a mediocre comedian to feel powerful by tearing down people who are actually talented. The words hit Kimmel like physical blows. His face had gone from pale to red, and his hands were trembling as he gripped the edges of his desk. You want to know about method acting, Jimmy? You want to know about staying in character? Hardy leaned down again, his face inches from Kimmel's. Right now, I'm not acting. This isn't a character. This is me, Tom Hardy, telling you exactly what I think of you and your pathetic excuse for a talk show. Kimmel's voice was barely a whisper when he finally managed to speak. Security. I think we need security. Hardy straightened up with a bitter smile. You're going to call security on your guest because he's telling you the truth? Because he's not playing along with your game anymore? The entire studio seemed to be holding its breath. Even the camera operators had stopped moving, transfixed by the confrontation unfolding in front of them. Here's what's going to happen, Jimmy, Hardy said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. I'm going to finish what I came here to say, and you're going to sit there and listen because, for once in your career, you're going to face the consequences of your actions. Hardy began to unclip his microphone, his movements deliberate and controlled, and then, I'm going to walk off this stage, and you can explain to your audience and your network exactly why one of Hollywood's biggest stars just called you out on live television. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Tom, we can edit this. We can... Edit this? Hardy's voice exploded with fury. You think this is going away? You think you can just cut this out and pretend it never happened? Jimmy, this is live television. Millions of people just watched you get exposed for exactly what you are. The silence that followed Hardy's words was deafening. Every person in that studio knew they were witnessing something unprecedented, something that would be talked about for years to come. Kimmel sat frozen in his chair, his face a mixture of terror and humiliation, while Hardy stood over him like a judge delivering a verdict. You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? Hardy continued, his voice now carrying a cold, calculated edge that was somehow more terrifying than his earlier anger. You actually had talent once, years ago, before you got drunk on your own power, before you decided that humiliating people was easier than being genuinely funny. The host's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. His usual arsenal of jokes and deflections had completely abandoned him. I've done research on you, Jimmy, did you know that? Before I agreed to come on this show, I watched hours of your interviews. I saw how you treat different guests differently. The A-list celebrities, the ones with real power in this industry, you kiss their asses. You laugh at their jokes. You nod along with their stories. You make them feel comfortable and welcome. Hardy began pacing again, but this time his movements were more controlled, like a predator circling its prey. But the lesser-known actors, the ones trying to make it, the ones who need the exposure more than you need them, those are the ones you go after. Those are the ones you try to break down for entertainment. Several audience members were now openly recording with their phones, and the producers had given up trying to stop them. This was going to be all over social media within minutes anyway. And you know what's even worse? Hardy stopped directly in front of Kimmel's desk again. You've created an entire culture around this behavior. Other hosts copy you, thinking, this is what good television looks like. You've made cruelty fashionable in late-night television. Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Tom, I never meant for any of this to... To what? To hurt anyone? To damage careers? To make people afraid to do interviews? Hardy's voice cut through Kimmel's attempted apology like a sword. You never meant for it to happen, but you kept doing it anyway, didn't you? Because it got ratings, because it got laughs, because it made you feel powerful. The host tried to stand up, perhaps thinking he could somehow regain control of the situation, but Hardy's presence seemed to pin him to his chair. Please, can we just... Sit down, Jimmy. Hardy's voice carried such authority that Kimmel immediately sank back into his seat. I'm not finished. The studio audience was completely riveted now, some leaning forward in their seats, as if they were watching a thriller movie instead of a talk show. The normal sounds of a television production, the shuffling of papers, the quiet conversations between crew members, had all stopped completely. Do you want to know what really makes me angry about all this? Hardy asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. It's not just that you try to humiliate me tonight. It's that you do this to people who can't fight back. Young actors who are just starting out, who are so grateful for any publicity that they'll sit there and take whatever abuse you dish out. Hardy suddenly grabbed the back of the guest chair and spun it around to face the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you what you just witnessed here tonight. You saw a talk show host try to destroy someone's reputation for entertainment, and when that person fought back, you saw him crumble like the coward he really is. The audience was completely silent, unsure whether they should applaud, cheer, or just sit in stunned amazement. Many of them looked as shocked as Kimmel himself. This man, Hardy gestured toward the host without even looking at him, makes millions of dollars a year to sit behind that desk and attack people who come here as his guests. He profits from other people's discomfort, and he's been doing it for so long that he thought he was untouchable. Kimmel made one final attempt to salvage his dignity. Security, please. Escort Mr. Hardy. Security. Hardy turned back to face Kimmel, and his smile was absolutely chilling. You're calling security because your guest is telling the truth about you? Because I'm not playing along with your little game anymore? The host's voice was shaking now. This is my show, and I'm asking you to leave. Your show, Hardy repeated slowly. Yes, it is your show, Jimmy, and after tonight, everyone will remember exactly what kind of show you really run here. Hardy began removing his microphone pack, his movements deliberate and theatrical. You know what the beautiful thing about live television is, Jimmy? You can't take any of this back. Every word I've said, every moment of your cowardice, it's all been broadcast to millions of people. The host looked desperately toward his producers, but they seemed as helpless as he was. This had gone so far beyond their worst nightmare scenarios that they had no protocol for dealing with it. And here's what's going to happen next, Hardy continued, now completely removing his microphone and placing it carefully on Kimmel's desk. I'm going to walk off this stage, and you're going to have to sit there and explain to your audience why one of Hollywood's most respected actors just called you a bully and a coward on your own show. Hardy took a step back from the desk, and for the first time since the confrontation began, Kimmel seemed to find some of his voice. This is unprofessional behavior, Tom. You've embarrassed yourself tonight. Hardy's laugh was sharp and bitter. I've embarrassed myself, Jimmy. I just stood up to a bully who's been hiding behind his desk for years, terrorizing guests who couldn't fight back. If that's embarrassing, then I'll wear that embarrassment as a badge of honor." The actor turned to address the audience directly, his voice now carrying the full power of his theatrical training. "Ladies and gentlemen, you all came here tonight expecting to see a typical talk show interview. Instead, you witnessed something much more important. You saw what happens when someone finally says no to a bully." Several audience members actually began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. Kimmel's face went from red to white as he realized that his own audience was turning against him. "And to everyone watching at home," Hardy continued, now speaking directly to the cameras, "remember what you saw here tonight. Remember that just because someone has a platform, just because they're on television, that doesn't give them the right to treat people with disrespect." Hardy began walking toward the exit, but he stopped and turned back one final time. "Oh, and Jimmy, next time you want to interview someone about their personal life, their relationships, their mental health, maybe try asking yourself if you'd want someone to treat your family the same way." The host tried one last desperate attempt to have the final word. "Tom, you're making a mistake. This will follow you for the rest of your career." Hardy paused in the wings, his silhouette framed by the stage lights. "No, Jimmy, this will follow you for the rest of your career. I'll be fine. I'm an actor. I'm good at what I do, and people will remember my work. But you? You'll be remembered as the talk show host who got destroyed by his own guest on live television." With that, Tom Hardy walked off the stage, leaving Jimmy Kimmel sitting alone at his desk, facing an audience that was now murmuring and whispering among themselves, and cameras that were still rolling on his moment of complete professional humiliation. The host sat there for several long seconds, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find words that could somehow salvage the situation. But there were no words. There was no joke that could deflect this moment, no commercial break that could erase what had just happened. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Kimmel looked into the camera and said, "We'll be right back after this break." But everyone in that studio, everyone watching at home, knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Have you ever seen a celebrity completely lose it on a talk show host like this before? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from Hollywood's most shocking moments.